Good evening and welcome to another exciting edition of the Marty Heiser Show. I know what you're thinking right now. Where's Marty? Don't know. Last I checked, he may have been over in Italy or somewhere in Europe trying to help Mario Draghi in the Euro crisis. But we're hoping he'll be back next Thursday, and I'm sure you are too. This evening we have an exciting show for you. The first half of the show we're going to be learning about New Pond Farm in Reading, Connecticut. And in the last half of the show, we have experts on in the deer, tick, and lime topic. And I think you're really going to want to stick around for the entire show. Before I start with talking about New Pond Farm, I want to just talk a little bit about what happened on the show last week. We had a 23-year-old young girl that was on the show. She was a recent graduate of the University of Wisconsin. And I just made a passing comment. I said, well, what's the American dream like for your generation? I know that when I graduated, I had an American dream, and dreamed that I'd marry a beautiful woman, that we'd buy a house, that we'd move to Connecticut and live happily ever after. And she looked at me and she said, well, we don't have an American dream. I said, well, what do you mean there's no American dream? She said, well, yeah, we're disillusioned. We're disillusioned with politics. We're disillusioned with our government. We're disillusioned with the military, with the debt. We're just plain disillusioned. And that really concerned me a great deal. And you know, there was a guy named Vance Havner, and he made the comment, he said, how sad will be the days in store when boys with dreams and visions come no more. This is a nation that was built on dreams. People are dying to come to this country every day. There's a 10-year waiting list for people to immigrant. This is the land of dreams. This is the land of opportunities. I'm going to read just a couple portions of two speeches. And you tell me who wrote these speeches. I think you'll pick up on this real quickly. It says, we cannot escape our destiny, nor should we try to do so. The leadership of the free world was thrust upon us 2 centuries ago in that little hall of Philadelphia. In the days following World War II, when the economic strength and power of America was all that stood between the world and the return of the Dark Ages, Pope Pius XII said, the American people have a great genius for splendid and unselfish actions. Into the hands of America, God has placed the destinies of an afflicted mankind. We are indeed, and we are today, the last best hope of man on earth. That's the teaser. Keep thinking who may have wrote that. I'll give you a little hint. That was from The Shining City Upon a Hill. Here's another excerpt of a speech he gave. He said, the poet called Miss Liberty's torch the lamp beside the golden door. Well, that was the entrance to America, and it still is. And now you really know why we are here tonight. The glistening hope, that lamp is still ours. Every promise, every opportunity is still golden in this land. And through that golden door, our opportunity is still golden in this land. And through that golden door, our children can walk into tomorrow with the knowledge that no one can be denied the promise that is America. Her heart is full, her door is still golden, her future is bright. She has arms big enough to comfort and strong enough to support. For the strength in her arms is the strength of her people. She will carry on in the 80s unafraid, unashamed, and unsurpassed. In this springtime of hope, some lights seem eternal. America's is. Thank you, God bless you, and God bless America. That was one and only Ronald Reagan. And let me tell you, I share his vision for America. There's every reason to be optimistic for America. If you start just from the top, we have a fantastic educational system. People come here from around the world for education. We have the cheapest energy costs in the world. We're 75% cheaper for energy costs versus Asia and Europe. When you think about it, 3 out of 5 companies that were recently polled said that they were going to bring manufacturing back to America. Just 2 weeks ago, Airbus announced that they were going to open a factory in Mobile, Alabama. We're the breadbasket of the world. We have 1/3 of the world's fresh water. America is at the epicenter of innovation. America pays for performance. In America, you can build your own business and get the credit for it in spite of what your government might tell you. So my message is tonight, dream dreams and dream them big, because America's best days are ahead. And when I think about America, I think about places like New Pond Farm. New Pond Farm has provided a lot of opportunities for a lot of kids through the years, and is one of the shining lights for all America. And I'm proud to say it's in our hometown of Reading, Connecticut. Tonight we have 2 of the people that run and are largely responsible for the success of New Pond Farm, both of which are very good friends of my wife and mine. And first I want to start with Ann Taylor. She's the executive director of New Pond Farm. Ann grew up in Southport, graduated from Oberlin College, has a degree in biopsychology, and did her graduate work in environmental education. For the past 25 years, she has worked at New Pond Farm, and she calls it her dream job. And the goal of New Pond Farm is to develop an environmental education center whose mission was to connect people to the land, to help students of all ages to appreciate, understand, and protect the environment. So with that, I welcome Ann Taylor. How are you?
Thank you. Good to see you.
And another very, very close friend of the family is Sharon Coates. Sharon Coates is an artist and a teacher. And if she teaches, she must have a lot of patience. And we'd like to welcome her to the show this evening. And she is the president of New Pond Farm.
Thanks.
Welcome to the show. So who wants to start? Well, oh, that was easy, wasn't it? And would you mind just giving us a little bit of a background on the history of New Pond Farm?
Sure. Well, I'd have to start with a wonderful environmentalist and actress named Carmen Matthews. And Carmen was an actress who, she got her start over at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts in England. And Shakespeare was really what she focused on initially. She was Maurice Evans' leading lady, and she traveled Europe doing Shakespearean plays in the United States as well. And she lived in New York City but wanted a place in the country. And she was going around with realtors looking at different spots, and when she hopped out of the car and saw New Pond Farm, this beautiful property with rolling pastures, she just said, this is it. So she purchased the property back in the mid-1950s, and it was just her home for about 20 years. And she lived there with a cousin, and they had a few sheep and apple orchards and that sort of thing. But she decided she really wanted to share the property with children. She had never married and never had a family of her own. So she started with a very small summer camp. Very coincidentally, some of her friends were just getting out of the Peace Corps.
And was she there full time then?
No, she was still just there, on the weekends. But she would come up in the summertime, and her friends from the Peace Corps helped her to start a summer camp. So she shooed the turkeys out of the turkey coop and hung up curtains and put down cots, and that was the very first rustic camp. And she worked with agencies in New York, and the children would just come out for about 6 days at a time, and they would eat with Carmen, and she would read them stories, and they'd swim in her pool. And at that point, she just had 2 cows and a few chickens, and that's the way it started back in the 70s. And it gradually got some traction, and by the early 1980s, she decided it would be great to make this a year-round environmental education center.
And how many people would visit the farm back
back then? Yeah. Very small. The camp just had 8 children, and she did that 3 times, so 24. And then by 1985, when they became a year-round education center, they might have had a couple of hundred. It was small, getting started.
And did she finance it largely all on her own then, or was she
in the beginning, yes. Okay. She was very generous. But I should say, by the mid-1980s, she worked with the Natural Science for Youth Foundation and John Ripley Forbes, and he was known for starting nature centers all up and down the East Coast. He and his team would come in and set up a 501c3, help them to establish a board of directors, and help them to get their programs launched. So at first, New Pond Farm was under the auspices of Natural Science for Youth, but by 85 they backed away, and so it was going to stand on its own 2 feet.
And it seems like it's been quite successful.
Yeah.
Well, we have at least 5,000 children, school children coming.
And where do they come from?
All across, well, mainly Fairfield County, but throughout Connecticut.
We're going to ask Ann to just slide her mic up just a little bit there.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Sure.
Get it up as high as you can. We don't want to miss a thing
How's
here tonight.
Better? Okay.
So I'm sorry, tell me one more time where they're coming from.
Mainly Fairfield County, but throughout Connecticut.
So do you get many inner city kids from like Bridgeport or anywhere like that? Or?
That's our summer camp program.
Okay. We do have some in the school programs too.
Yes.
We work with Bridgeport and Norwalk, so we do have schools.
I can only imagine for someone that's grown up in Bridgeport what it's like to come out to New Pond Farm and not have the city lights and not hear the sirens and just be outdoors and maybe hear some coyotes from time to time.
It's a great place. We have actually tomorrow, our 3rd session of summer camp begins, and these children will be from Danbury. So we switched over the years from New York City children to city children from Connecticut. We work with Norwalk, Bridgeport, and Danbury. And now the camp has changed a little bit. We have a beautiful learning center for them to stay in, and they come to us for 10 days instead of 6. And 4 girls, 4 boys, same number, so it's very small and personal. They come on a Friday, get to know the farm, and by Monday, 4 girls and 4 boys from the area join them. So we have city children and area children together, which is terrific.
Do they get to milk the cows?
Well, because we have a state licensed and we are a dairy farm of distinction, only our farm managers milk the cows, but every camper has an opportunity to be an early morning farmer, and they love it. They get up very early in the morning.
How early is very early?
Oh, for them, probably 7. Our farm managers are up earlier than that.
You have some of the best farm managers I've ever seen.
We do. They're fantastic. But they meet the, each individual camper will go down and they'll bring the cows up from the pasture. They'll see how the milking takes place. They'll help to feed the cows and feed the chickens and the sheep. So they really have one-on-one time with the farm manager. And then our milk is pasteurized but not homogenized, and they love to drink the milk, and sometimes they'll make ice cream. It's great.
When you raise honeybees?
Sure.
Do you extract the honey there yourself?
We do. As a matter of fact, today we just had another honey harvest. We have 2 wonderful beekeepers, Tammy and Ann, and we have an Adopt a Hive program. So families will make a donation to the farm, and then they'll work with our beekeepers, and they have their own hives on the farm. And today they did, this is probably the 3rd extraction of the summer, so we have a lot of honey this year, which is great. You're a beekeeper.
I am.
It's a great year.
I'm learning the hard way. Yeah, it is actually. And if you do everything right, everything works out great.
Yeah.
But I had to get a little help with the hive the other day. So, but it is fascinating. My wife tasted the honey and thought, how come your honey tastes different than other people's honey? It's coming along okay. So tell me about the different facilities you have there. You have the sleeping quarters, you have the nature center.
Well, there are 102 acres, so the property is so beautiful. And if you're a member of New Pond Farm, then you have access to the property 7 days a week. And there are trails, 2.5 miles worth of trails. But the real beauty, I think, is the openness of the pastures. And so a lot of people come and they'll walk the perimeter trail and use the pond and that sort of thing. But we have a beautiful new learning center, which has the bunk rooms, which we talked about, but it also has a great gathering place, which has Native American artifacts, classroom, wildlife room, offices. We've got the barns. We have a Native American encampment. We do a lot of Native American programming, so we have a wigwam and a longhouse, and
all authentic.
All authentically recreated. It's so
well,
beautiful.
you have a building out on the top of the hill that has a big telescope out there.
Our astronomy building.
And who teaches that? Is there
We have a very active team of volunteers, so if anyone in your audience is interested in astronomy, they should contact us and we'll put them in touch with the volunteers. Once a month they'll come out and we'll look through the telescopes, and it's great.
Well, I heard, I don't know if you saw the Land Rover that has either landed or is planning to land on Mars. So I wonder if we have a telescope that can see that far. Probably not, huh?
Probably not. They watch the space station, though. We watch,
really?
Very often when we're up there, we can see the space station come by, because the timing, so we'll all look in the right direction and watch it cross.
When my niece and nephews visit us at our house, we'll lay out on the patio at night and count satellites. And you can count dozens of satellites in a really, really clear night. It's quite amazing.
Well, Redding is a great place because we don't have street lights.
I think it's the 3rd best viewing sky in the state.
In the state, so it's a lovely spot to come and look.
Be careful what you do at night. You're getting your picture taken, right?
That's right.
Well, so what are some of the events that people can, the public can come and visit New Pond Farm over the course of the season?
Well, our Oktoberfest and our Mayfair, those are the 2 big festivals that are open to the public. Everything else is membership because of insurance purposes and whatnot. But they are truly wonderful, wonderful events. They're uplifting because we have old-fashioned crafts and, oh gosh, Ann is more versed on this also.
We have wagon rides.
Wagon rides.
We've been on those.
Yeah.
Those are terrific.
And we have, what is it?
Well, you have the people that make the
artisans.
popcorn.
Artisans, though, from past years. So it kind of sometimes brings
pie
you
makers
back.
and a little bit of everything there.
Yeah.
And people in period costumes.
And that's in October. That's the weekend after Columbus Day weekend. And then our Founders Mayfair, we do the sheep shearing and the spinning and the weaving, and we've got maypole dancing and Morris dancing. And so those are great public events. And then if people go to our website, which is newpondfarm.org, they can see our calendars. And in the summertime, we're a little bit quiet just because we have the summer camp and we just finished summer Shakespeare. But starting in September and October, they can go online and they can see our calendars because many of the programs are for members and non-members alike. our members are given first opportunity to sign up. but
And
non-members-
can people buy food from the farm?
If you go to our dairy annex, because again, we're a state licensed dairy and we are one of the state's dairy farms of distinction, which is very nice, you can buy milk and yogurt from us.
And can you buy any meat or beef or anything like that?
You can, limited supply of meat.
It must be in high demand.
You have to remember that the farm is just one element of New Pond Farm, and it's a very small, but it is a working farm. And we, for instance, I'm the president. I hardly ever get to any eggs because they're so popular. They're gone by the time I get there. But
Now, how
but
many,
it's-
do you depend on volunteers at all?
Sure,
Oh,
loads of
absolutely.
volunteers.
And how many volunteers would you say you have working out there?
Well, at an event, for example, the Harvest Festival that Sharon was mentioning, we might have 100 volunteers that day. But there are volunteers throughout the year. Some come and paint, some are carpenters, some...
I'd like to think most of them are from Reading. No?
Loads from Reading.
a lot
and
from
Richfield.
Oh,
Reading.
good. I mean, let
we-
people of Reading support New Pond
Oh,
Farm.
they do. Oh, they're wonderful. We've got wonderful members, wonderful volunteers, and we work with the National Charity League from both Richfield and Reading. That's a mother and daughter organization, and they do a terrific job helping us with all of our events.
Now, when you take kids in from, say, Bridgeport, and they're there for, you said, six days?
10 days.
10 days. So from the time they, did a lot of them come year after year?
It depends on the agencies and
Okay.
whether or not they think a particular child would benefit from a repeat experience. And our counselors, at the end of a session, will do write-ups of each of the children. Some of them might be ready to go to a much bigger camp than ours, but some might benefit from coming back to a small and personal camp. So we do definitely have repeat
Can you see a real
campers.
change in the children's attitudes or their outlook just in that 10-day period from the time they start to when they leave?
I think we can point to quite a few experiences like that. Our camp is designed to celebrate each child as an individual because it is so small. We have 4 counselors and just the 8 and 8 children, and a lot of staff members help with the camp and volunteers as well. So for them, they have 10 days to really be children and to relax and to enjoy the peace and quiet of the farm. They do lots of exploring around the property.
And can they take their smartphone with them, or
No technology allowed.
smartphones are banned?
You bet.
No TVs,
It's going,
no DVDs.
Exactly, nothing.
Wow.
It's
all,
great.
All 4 of my grandchildren attended New Pond Camp, and all of
That's
them
why they're
loved
so
it.
good.
Well, there are other reasons, but I think that New Pond Farm Camp made a real impression on them. All 4 of them, their very favorite activity was helping to take care of the animals. And of course, my girls, both of my granddaughters, love to cook, and so they love taking part of that program. But I wanted to get back about volunteers for a minute, because our very best volunteers is our board of directors. We have a very hands-on group of directors that put in a lot of time because they absolutely love the place. And I think I can't express enough how important it is for people to volunteer, because you are working with like-minded people that enjoy the same things, that have the same passion as you. I've been a volunteer for most of actually all of my adult life, and even before that. And New Pond Farm is my absolute favorite ever, because the other nice thing about volunteering locally is that you really see how your efforts are used and how the money you raise is used, that you don't see when you send a check off to whoever. So.
Well, that's terrific. And you have a golf outing coming up.
Absolutely, Tuesday, September 18th.
Are there any openings left?
Oh yes, but however, we've had the best early start that we've ever had. This is our 9th annual golf outing. It is such fun. We actually have tried
That's at the Reading Country Club.
At the Reading Country Club, which is beautiful, challenging, wonderful food.
Great food.
Great food, absolutely. But it's just such a fun experience, and it has to date been our most profitable fundraiser. And I have a wonderful committee there again.
And what's the date of that event?
Tuesday, September 18th. And we do have spots open. we are always looking for new players. I keep trying to encourage more women to play golf, and I think we're going to have more this year, which is wonderful. And then during the after golf, we have a wonderful cocktail reception where we have, of course, the wonderful food from the country club, and then we have a silent auction. We will have things from, of course, the most popular things are related to golf, either golf clubs or a foursome at other courses, including Reading Country Club. But then we'll have some lovely pieces of handcrafted jewelry and a little of something to appeal to everyone. Let's put it that way. But it's a wonderful, wonderful event.
One of the things I enjoy about New Pond Farm is you have those. Well, you have the turtle that's walking. Do you still have the turtle
Bert,
walking around?
He's a land tortoise, and he was donated by my grandchildren that moved to St. Croix. He is so popular.
Are children pretty gentle with them?
Oh, sure.
Oh, sure. Yes, he has a big fan club.
Oh,
and
really?
in the warm weather, families will come and knock on the door to see if they can take Bert out for a walk. And he's enormous. I mean, he's just growing by leaps and bounds. And it certainly helps our budget to have him out there eating clover and sorrel versus buying romaine lettuce at the store.
And you have some iguanas. What are the other creatures that you have back there?
We've got a lot of unwanted pets that come our way. Lots of reptiles. We've got wonderful snakes, really friendly snakes that we use in our program, and iguanas, and great chameleons and geckos, and all in different types of turtles. So.
Well,
and a barred owl, Bernard.
And a barred owl. So lots to see if people come, and we love to encourage people just to come and visit, you know, even if they come just one time as a non-member to check us out, and we always hope that they'll just fall in love with what they see and want to support us and become a member, because that really is a large part of our support is through membership and gifts.
Well, as a Reading resident, New Pond Farm is really the focus, the central focus of Reading, Connecticut. There's no question.
Well,
everybody
very
talks
nice.
about New Pond Farm, and everybody supports it. And I really think the success of New Pond Farm is because of the dynamic duo and the chemistry
you're
you two
very
have.
nice.
Thank
I
you.
mean, you two
I'm
work
glad we
incredibly
do
well
get, and we
together.
really do get along well.
We do. And we've got great staff, great volunteers. It's terrific. And I think we are all just so excited to have the opportunity to help Carmen's dream come true.
Well, yeah, and she had a vision, right? We
did.
started the show talking about dreams and visions, and she had a dream and a vision. And it's
Yes.
just a miracle that it's still being carried out, you know. So what else would you like to say to the listening audience tonight? How can we get them excited to come out and see us?
There's so much to see and do, and we are always open-armed. We welcome everyone.
And nobody gets turned away.
And
No, and it's an extraordinary property, especially for Fairfield County, to come out and see those pastures, which not only are protected because New Pond Farm owns them, but there is also an agreement with the Reading Land Trust so that they will never be developed. So when you come and you see the beauty of that land, it will be here for children and grandchildren. So it's an extraordinary organization, very worthwhile to
Okay,
support.
so Tuesday, September 18th is the next major event.
Yes,
and
sir.
then the fall festival is when?
Saturday, October.
I want to say the 18th. It's the weekend after
Okay.
Columbus Day.
Okay.
That Saturday.
So in order to check that out, anybody listening can go to newpondfarm.org, and they can get all the information they ever dreamed of. And there's a
Yes.
phone number there where they can call and ask people and get whatever information they might need, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Terrific.
And they can join us on Facebook, too.
Well, we hope you'll both come back.
Thank you.
And I'm sure the phone's going to be ringing off the hook, and this is probably going to be one of the highest rated nights for our show.
We hope.
And I'm going to guess that Parker's watching. Is that fair?
Absolutely.
There you go.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks so much for
Thanks.
coming on. I
Thank
can't
you.
wait to see you.
Lovely to see you.
Thank
out
Thank
at
you,
the farm.
David.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Well, on the remainder of the show, we're going to be talking about deer, ticks, and Lyme. And as many of you folks that have watched this show in the past know, I am the chairman of the Fairfield County Deer Management Alliance. And I've been active in the Alliance for the past 4 years. The Fairfield County Deer Management Alliance is really trying to encourage people to work towards deer reduction as a way to combat tick and Lyme disease. And this evening, we've got a couple experts in the field, I might add, and we feel honored to have them here tonight. And let me start with Mark Friedman. Oh, I've got your information here somewhere. Anyway, Mark Friedman is the Chief Medical Officer at First Stop Health. He's an attending emergency physician at St. Vincent's Hospital. He's an assistant clinical professor of trauma and emergency medicine at the University of Connecticut. He was the chief of emergency medicine at St. Elizabeth Hospital of Boston. And he has really taken a real personal interest in the deer, tick, and Lyme connection. So we'll start by saying welcome to the show, Dr. Friedman. Thanks a lot for coming. And we also have on the show this evening Dave Schugertz, who is an author. He's a journalist and a small business owner of a business that he built, not the government. Is that fair?
That's fair to say.
Terrific. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Great. Mark, let's jump right in. This is a topic that's near and dear to your heart. How did you get started? How did you start focusing on this topic?
I have literally been interested in Lyme disease for 35 years. When I was a medical student, I happened to hear Dr. Alan Steer at Yale New Haven Hospital talk about this new disease that he had just discovered, and which was later called Lyme disease, and subsequently determined to be caused by a bacteria called Borrelia burgdorferi. And I've had the occasion to diagnose the disease many times, practicing in Massachusetts and now Connecticut. In fact, I've even diagnosed it in Illinois when I practiced out there. And I've followed the development of the disease literally for 35 years, since my medical student days.
And where did Lyme disease come from, and how old a disease is it?
There's a lot of misconceptions surrounding Lyme disease. One of them is that it's a new disease. The oldest known case of Lyme disease, documented Lyme disease, is 5,300 years old. They discovered the DNA of Borrelia burgdorferi in the Iceman, the man that they found frozen in the Alps when a glacier melted at the Austrian-Italian border. And when they autopsied him last year, they discovered the bacteria. This is published in National Geographic last November.
And why is it, so every now and again you'll hear people say, well, why is the deer so important in the life cycle of the tick? You want to just comment on what role deer play in the life cycle of the tick?
I wondered about that very question for many years. One day, I was watching a hunter field dress a deer, and it literally struck me like a lightning bolt. The animal's hide was literally alive with ticks. They were crawling all over this animal because as the animal cooled, they were leaving. And there must have been several hundred, if not 1,000 ticks on this one deer. And come to realize this is where the ticks are mating. Because the females attach and the males go from female to female and mate. And this was like a revelation to me. Yet when I mentioned this to someone who was knowledgeable in the field, the response was, oh yeah, all the entomologists know that. Well, you know what? I didn't know it. Doctors don't know it, and the general public certainly doesn't know it. And there's a lot of misinformation being spread out there to the effect that if you eliminate deer, it doesn't impact Lyme disease. Well, it really makes a huge difference, because if you interrupt the breeding cycle of the tick by eliminating their mating place, the tick populations drop like a rocket. And I think Dave has a slide here that shows some of the scientific data that demonstrates that.
Well, Dave, so at what deer density level do we start to see Lyme disease start to fade away? I know, just by way of background, the DEP, and you're already aware of this, but a lot of people that are listening tonight don't. The DEP came in with their aerial survey this past year, and they said that we've gone from 64 to 76 deer per square mile in Fairfield County. That's a lot of deer.
Yes.
How many deer did we have 50 years ago?
In those days, 50 years ago would be the 60s, right? So in those days, it would have been about 40 or 30 per square mile, and in many cases, way less than that. Like, there are still parts of Connecticut where it's under 15, but not in suburbia, not in Fairfield County. Fairfield County is way high, the highest in the state.
So what are the conditions that made it right for this herd to explode?
Our land use, now if you go back, you should go back to the beginning. When the settlers came, there were about 10 to 15 deer per square mile, and that was because there was a certain stability by what the Native Americans did, hunted the deer and had a certain, relationship with that. The settlers, when the European settlers cut down trees like crazy. That was what they did. They cut them down initially because that was their idea of civilization. They cut them down for railroad ties. They cut them down for charcoal to help the steel mills in Pittsburgh. And so they denuded the whole of the Northeast. What people today don't realize is that most of the Northeast was treeless in about 1800, 1850, thereabouts. And slowly there was a conservation movement built, around, say, Teddy Roosevelt's time, and they brought back trees. And meanwhile, people left the farms and let the land become forested again. And that's what we've got now today. We've actually built deer habitat. It wasn't there 100 years ago. It wasn't there even 50 or 60 years ago. There are actually aerial photos of Connecticut in 1933 that show that most of the land then was still farms, rolling green farms. And that's not deer habitat, not generally. But when you add the little niches that we create when we suburbanize a place, we get perfect deer habitat. It's just like perfect for raising deer.
And so is it fair to say that every area that has high deer densities ends up with Lyme disease? I mean,
it's not. It's a necessary but not sufficient condition. But by that I mean, without the deer, you don't get Lyme disease. But you don't necessarily have to have Lyme disease because you have deer. There are areas in other parts of the country, for example, where there are deer herds, but very little Lyme disease. And there's something about the ecology in those regions which apparently is unfriendly to the tick. In the endemic zone, which is New England, New Jersey, the mid-Atlantic states, Wisconsin, and Minnesota, anywhere you've got deer, you've got Lyme disease.
And isn't Pittsburgh now have the highest number of reported cases of Lyme disease? I thought I read that about 3 months ago.
It's a hot spot, but so is all of Pennsylvania. Southeastern Pennsylvania is very hot now. Virginia is getting it in spades, and now the Carolinas and Maryland and so on are getting it. Of course, Connecticut remains way always in the high, either highest or third or second, in the country.
So what do we have to do to alleviate this problem?
Well, there are many things you should do. You should certainly practice personal protection. We need to educate people about the ticks and where they'll be. The nymphal stage of the tick is so hard to find in the spring, and yet that's when most people get it. Late May, June, July, and those are nymphal ticks that feed on them. And then if you really want to find the life cycle of the tick is a 2-year life cycle, and the early stages of it rely on little critters like mice and voles and shrews and so on. But in the final stage, the adult stage, just like Dr. Freeman just said, that it mates on the deer, and the deer, the female deer tick, adult female deer tick, relies on deer for 94% of its, the 94% of all female ticks get their last blood meal from a deer before they drop off, and each one can lay 2,000 to 3,000 eggs. So
and what role do rodents play in the life cycle of the tick?
The other end of the life cycle, when in the nymphal and larval stages, that's where, and the rodents are actually the reservoir for the actual bacteria. The deer do not actually carry the bacteria. It's not, you don't get it from the deer, but the deer supply the tick the exact thing they need at the adult stage to continue the life cycle. So if you can reduce the deer, and like there's been studies that were demonstrated, if you can get the deer down to 10 to 12 per square mile, you can get dramatic reductions in the ticks, like 1/9 as many ticks. And if you do that, if you get the tick density down, you will get the Lyme disease down. Here's an example of that. This is Mumford Cove.
So this is a study that Howard did, right, from the DEP?
He was involved, yes. He was on the deer side of that, and then there's the other side, the Lyme disease. In Mumford Cove, by what was the year, 1999, 98, 99, they had as many as 30 cases of Lyme in a year, and this is only a community of only about 100, 150 families. So that's an awful lot of Lyme.
Yep.
And what they did was they went in and reduced the deer, and when they got it down to 10 to 12 per square mile, which is down here into 2001, 2002, it vastly reduced the cases of Lyme disease down to 5, 4, 3, 0, 2, 0, 2, and like that as it goes out. You can see the graph going out to the right, and it'll be indefinitely like that. They're maintaining their deer herd at less than 10 per square mile, and they have no appreciable Lyme disease.
So it's pretty clear proof that getting deer numbers down has a substantial impact on tick disease.
There have been multiple scientific studies that have demonstrated that. The studies that have not shown that effect were all cases where they didn't reduce the deer below the threshold necessary to interrupt the tick reproductive cycle. If you get down to 20 deer per square mile, you still haven't reached the threshold.
Do you start to see some reduction at that level?
You'll see a reduction, but not, it's dramatic. It's literally dramatic. Remember, if one tick can lay 3,000 eggs, that's a potential 27 billion ticks in 3 generations. That's a lot of ticks.
That's a lot. So the visual that you're conveying to me is these deer are like B-52 bombers going through the woods, dropping millions and millions of tick eggs.
That's pretty right on.
Yeah.
That's pretty
So
correct.
when you think about the problems that are caused by these super high deer densities, unsustainably high deer densities, you know, it's kind of funny. When my wife and I would drive through Connecticut in this area, we'd say, "Oh, isn't it wonderful the way the woods are so open and clear?" Well, that's not natural, and I think you have a really good picture here of what the forest should look like, right?
Well, we have 2 examples of what are called deer exclosures. That's where on one side you keep the deer out, and on the other side you let them freely go around. This one here is Redding, Highstead Arboretum, and I hope it shows up on the camera, but on the right side is where the deer have been allowed to roam free, and on the left side there's a fence that keeps them out. And you can see the lush growth on the inside and the no growth on the outside.
And that's after how many years?
That's that particular one, I believe, is like 8 or 9 years old.
Okay, so all they did was put up a fence in an open range area, and everything to keep the deer out.
Yeah, there's nothing else has been done there except to put the fence up.
Okay, and you have another one here too, right?
And by the way, just to remark, you know, there's some who are spreading this kind of notion that it's the shade which prevents the forest floor from growing, but there is practically 90%, 95% shade, and it's clear that the effect is still there.
Right, right.
This one.
Where's this one from?
That's in Pennsylvania, and that one is, the left side is a monoculture on the forest floor of hay-scented fern. And on the right side, it's so dramatic you think like it's a trick picture, but you're looking right down the fence, and on the right side is where the deer have not been. And it's a lush, diverse, there's some numerous different kinds of plants. On the right side, or on the left side, as you can see, it's only one kind of plant, this fern, which grows. There's a researcher in Pittsburgh who says that up to 1/3 of Pennsylvania's forests now look like the left hand.
Really?
They're covered with hay-scented fern.
Huh.
If you let it go, that's what we're in
Now,
for.
do you have any idea how many species of birds and varieties of plants have been lost up in this area? I read Audubon Society, I think, had a number of 17.
Yes, they keep track of those sort of things, and it's quite a number of birds and other wildlife that get erased, you know.
Now, isn't, with the tick, what percentage of the people that are getting Lyme disease are also getting a co-infection now?
It's growing.
I had heard a number like 64% of the ticks tested had a co-infection. Does that sound right?
That sounds right for ticks tested. Transmission is a whole different story.
Okay.
I think the scary thing is that while the co-infection with ehrlichiosis is treated if you treat the patient with doxycycline, we're seeing more and more ticks infected with babesiosis, which is a malaria-like disease that can actually be fatal. And this is not addressed by doxycycline. So if you get a rash and you're treated, you may be cured from your Lyme disease, but you can still die from babesiosis. The magnitude of this disease is staggering. There were 30,000 reported cases in 2010. And if you figure that only 1 in 10 cases gets reported, you're looking at probably
it's an epidemic.
300,000 cases concentrated in New England, the Mid-Atlantic, and those 2 states in the Midwest.
Well, Dave, you had a real interesting data point the other day regarding the number of people that were affected from West Nile virus in Connecticut versus Lyme disease. What was that relationship?
Yeah, I think there have been 80, in the last like 10 years, there have been 89 cases of West Nile in all of Connecticut.
But we spent a lot of money on that, right?
And 3 deaths. And you know, so that's how many cases in the 10-year period in Connecticut alone. There have been 30,000 roughly cases of Lyme reported, which could represent 300,000 cases, real cases in Connecticut.
So doctor, tell me, for children, what kind of effects can Lyme disease have, and these other tick diseases have on children, whether it's learning or neurologic?
They can be devastating diseases. Lyme disease is very similar to syphilis. It attacks the heart, it attacks the nervous system, it can cause learning disabilities, it can cause arthritis. It can be a terrible disease, especially if the diagnosis isn't picked up. Now
the test is a blood test, normally.
The initial diagnosis is a clinical diagnosis. If you're waiting for the blood test, you've waited too long. It takes 30 days to seroconvert. If you get the rash and there's been a tick exposure, you need to be treated. You shouldn't wait around for a blood test. The blood test may become seropositive after about 30 days. It's not a perfect test like any other medical test.
What do you think the accuracy rate is on the test? I had heard numbers in the 60% range.
I can't quote you numbers. All I know is there are false positives and false negatives, meaning you can have a positive test and not have the disease, or a negative test and have it.
Well, the question people ask me all the time is, well, how come there isn't a vaccine? And I know there was one, and then I say, well, there was one, but I don't have a good answer as to, well, why we don't anymore. Any idea why we don't?
The vaccine was problematic. There were side effects from the vaccine. It was only 90-some% effective, which is actually not very good for a vaccine. The vaccine, that's correct. The vaccine is still available for your dog, but not for you.
And does it work pretty well for dogs? Is it better than Frontline?
It's better than nothing, but it's not good enough to be licensed for human use. There was also very little use of the vaccine. The manufacturer basically said, we're not making any money on this, why should we do it?
Yeah, that was what I had heard, but it didn't register with me because I would have thought the demand would be huge.
You would think that, but it's not necessarily the case. Human nature being what it is, prevention is not a big priority. People are much more interested in a disease they already have than one that they're at risk for.
Yeah, the thing that's just really troubled me with my involvement in this effort is why people seem somewhat content to live with this exposure to such an insidious disease when the solution is very, very simple.
This is a major public health policy failure in this country. There's a lot of misinformation that's going around. There's a lot of people that are convinced that eliminating the deer will not solve the Lyme disease problem, and that's completely untrue. I mean, if we could get the deer densities down to below 10 to 12 deer per square mile, it's absolutely scientifically proven this will decrease the incidence of not only Lyme disease, but these other newly emerging diseases of babesiosis and ehrlichiosis that we've just now started to deal with.
Yeah, the Fairfield County Deer Management Alliance recently sent a letter to the head of the DEP, and we also sent a letter to Senator Blumenthal, and we said, look, we really need regulatory relief from the DEP guidelines that protect deer. So people, I'll walk up to people all the time and I'll say, why do you think there's a hunting season? And they'll say to harvest deer. I tell them, no, that's exactly wrong. It's to protect deer. What we need, in other words, 7.5 months out of the year, if you harm a deer, you go right to jail. Unless they come through your windshield and then your trophy, your door prize is the deer. You get to keep the deer.
The major predator of deer in this country in the 21st century are motor vehicles.
Yeah, I talked to our local police officer and I asked him, I said, how come more people don't die hitting deer? And he said, because it happens so fast, they don't have time to swerve. Think about that. Yeah. So now, there are a number of programs in Fairfield County, right, to do something about deer and draw down deer numbers?
Yes, yeah.
And do you know what's going on in, say, Brookfield or Newtown?
Now, I should distinguish that there are several levels of effort. And one effort is the sport hunters, and they do their part. And I think hunting belongs as an element of any deer policy. But when you want to get more effective and more serious about it, then you go to a form of controlled hunting, where people or the town sponsor a higher degree of effort. Usually it goes with a safety program, like then you need to shoot from elevated stands, tree stands, and a couple of other things that keep it way safe. And then if you ever have to, you go to the higher level, which would be sharpshooting, where you get usually professionals take out the deer and do it very effectively.
See, I like the sound of that. So you can get guys that were maybe trained by the military, that are experts in that field, that virtually could not make a mistake.
They're incredibly good. There's some that have shot 12,000 deer. They're just incredibly good.
Now, how much more effective is firearm use versus archery?
Well, it's a multiple of effectiveness, but lately the DEP's been noticing that crossbows really enhance the bow hunters. They're 5 times more effective than the regular bow. So and then you have rifles are way more effective than bows. And these sharpshooters are very, very good. I mean, what they typically do, they'll take out groups of deer, not just 1 or 2. They'll take out the whole group when they need to.
Well, I'm a firm believer that on private property, that private landowners that are in these afflicted areas really should be able to, remove deer year-round until the situation is brought under control. Now, I know in Reading we have a program that was started that complements the recreational hunting. That's called Be Safe Reading. And what that is that connects private landowners with people that are focused on more deer management than just trying to get a big buck. And they will harvest all the deer that they have access to. That same type of program is being done in Wilton right now, and it's also begun in Newtown, and we're pretty excited about those efforts. And the other thing I'd say about Reading is in the areas, and we're going to the 4th year of the Be Safe Reading effort, in the properties where we've been active for the past 3 years, we're starting, people are reporting fewer ticks. They're reporting they haven't had to spray their plants with Bobex, which is coyote urine, which doesn't smell too good, right? And they haven't used tick sprays on their lawn, which kill everything, including our precious honeybees. Are you doing any research work on the different lawn sprays or the impact of that?
That's one of my favorite subjects, and I've been paying attention to it, and I would really love to have somebody that would lay them out side by side, all the different sprays. I think that, and there are quite a number of different angles to that, because there are the chemical style sprays, which are the most familiar to people, and they're used by the professionals. And there's a program, a study being conducted in our area right now by CDC and others, Yale, to see if bifenthrin will be effective in 1 spraying a year. And I think it will be found to be moderately effective but not like incredible gangbusters. There's a lot of hope for other what sound like more natural sprays. There's like rosemary oil and wintergreen oil combined. There's garlic has been tried, and there's a fungus that people are eager to see. It hasn't come on the market for years now, though, so I don't know where it is. But these are all hopeful things because they're more natural. Although there are a lot of natural things that you wouldn't want to drink or get on you. But anyway, there's a lot of different sprays being tried.
Permethrin is one of the primary sprays.
Well, yes, and that is a good. For personal protection, you want to get some permethrin and spray it on your clothes, and that actually kills ticks. You don't spray it on your body; you spray it on your clothes, and it'll last for several washings, up to 6 washings usually. And that's what the U.S. military puts on their fatigues, their battle dress. So it's pretty effective. Then you use DEET on your skin, and the most powerful DEET you can get is the highest concentration of DEET.
Yeah, I know that in Canada they don't allow concentrations higher than 15%. In here we sell it, with concentrations as high as 40–45%.
Oh, you can get 100% DEET now. I just saw it online. Yeah.
It's got to be good for absorption through the skin.
I've seen a lot of cases of Lyme disease. I have never treated DEET poisoning in my career.
Yeah.
Yes.
So with now the cases that, I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but on the cases of Lyme disease that you've treated, can you give us some of the specific symptoms? In other words, I think a lot of people are watching the show tonight, and I run into this all the time. People will say, "Well, I've got this pain in my knee that I never had before," and I always say, "Might be Lyme." I mean, am I too far out on that?
Not at all. I mean, most of the cases that I diagnose and treat, they walk in with a history of a tick bite and a target lesion, and it's crystal clear.
So what percentage of the people that get Lyme have the bullseye?
I don't have that statistic.
Okay.
I would say.
But it's not 100%.
No, certainly not nearly 100%. A large percentage of the people that I diagnose have it because that's what helps me make the diagnosis. The problem is a lot of people don't get any rash at all. And I've seen rashes that are not your classic Lyme disease rash, and you agonize over it. Is this Lyme disease or not? If there's a history of a tick bite, it's pretty easy. If there's a history of potential tick exposure but no history of a bite, do you treat that? It's a difficult decision. Or do you wait 30 days for the blood test to see if they seroconvert? And what about people who come in with complete heart block or pain in their shoulder or some strange neurologic syndrome? Could they have Lyme disease? Absolutely. They used to call syphilis the great imposter. It could present as almost anything.
And headaches, common symptom.
Sure.
And any neurological pain, kind of anywhere in the body that suddenly arises.
The problem is it's created almost a psychosis situation where people come in and they think they have Lyme disease because they have all these strange symptoms that no one can put together. And then it becomes very difficult to sort out the people who really do have what amounts to tertiary borreliosis or Lyme disease, and the ones that have something else or just think they have it.
And how do the insurance companies treat the medical community with respect to treating Lyme disease?
There's a lot of controversy in medical circles, let alone insurance circles. And insurance companies are looking out for the bottom line, dare I say it. So they would tend to not want to do anything that's expensive if they have a good reason not to. On the other hand, there's a lot of people who are treating what the experts don't consider Lyme disease with very dangerous doses of powerful antibiotics. So,
are there any homeopathic cures for Lyme disease other than doxycycline?
Not that I'm aware.
No, I'm not aware of them either. Now, I have people come up to me all the time and say, "Oh, you got to go see this homeopathic doctor, and he did all this for Lyme disease." And I sit there and I get really nervous because I don't know. I mean, I kind of think it's doxy or nothing.
Some people think they have Lyme disease, and they think they've been cured.
Yeah. Yeah. So Do you think the trend is in increasing Lyme disease cases, or have we peaked?
I've seen a lot of Lyme disease this season because we've had a mild winter and a lot of people are out, and I just saw so much of it this year. And the thing that really worries me is babesiosis, which I haven't seen yet, but I've heard unfortunate cases where people have died from it in Connecticut, people I know.
Gotcha. Now, Dave, you had commented the other day that one of the obstacles in deer management is the fact that we're losing the hunting crowd. That fewer and fewer people
hunters
are hunting.
have been declining steadily. The population of hunters has been declining steadily for years now, and it shows no signs of turning around. The chief issue is that young people like video games, not
isn't
outdoors.
Part of it a cost issue though?
Well, I don't know. I don't know that hunting is that much more expensive than it was 10 years ago, but it's way less popular.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's really that.
See,
there is a cost, of course.
Yeah, I got involved in that in the last couple of years, and I can tell you that on average, I see guys spending up to $2,000 a year to participate in this. You know, whether it's arrows at $10 each and broadheads at $12 each. And then it's the corn feed. You know, we've got a drought, and we're up to, you know, they're going to pay $10 a bushel for this stuff, and the cost, and the transportation costs, and the fuel costs, and the butchering costs, and on and on and on and on. These guys pour a fortune into this. You know, some of the things that we recommended to the DEP were, you know, why don't we allow people to sell venison, for example? Why don't we, in the afflicted areas of Fairfield County, why don't we waive licensing fees so people don't have to do that? You know, why don't we allow people to check in over the phone? I mean, there are just a whole host of things that the DEP could do, but they have just this real culture around, you know, hunting, recreational hunting, and all the rest. We're going to have to, unfortunately, we're going to have to wrap up pretty quick here. We're down to 30 seconds. So I just really wanted to thank Mark for taking the time to come in. I can't tell you what a treat it was to hear the medical perspective on Lyme disease, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave.
Dave, always a pleasure to see you. As I said, Lyme and tick disease, they're just horrible. And when you think about the number of people in Connecticut that are being affected by this, I'll actually take my hat off to Senator Blumenthal. He's one of the very, very few high-level politicians that continues to raise awareness for Lyme disease, and we really appreciate his efforts in calling that to people's attention. What we need to do is really reduce the deer herd. We need to restore it back down to what it was at 10 deer per square mile. Thanks so much for being on the show. This is the Marty Heiser Show, where you always get the truth. Stay tuned. We're going to be back next week, and Marty will be on the show. So thanks so much. Have a good night.